Do you struggle with coming up with book ideas? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you a logical, methodical approach to how to come up with book ideas. What's up, guys? Dave Jacobson here, best-selling author and book publisher. And in today's video, I'm going to show you a three-step methodical approach for how to come up with book ideas. So without further ado, I'm going to shrink my melon-sized head here. And as you can see, I've created a Word document here that I think you're going to find useful. And I've entitled it, How to Come Up with Book Ideas the Logical Way. Right? You can come up with book ideas however you want. There's not necessarily a right way or a wrong way, but I think this way is going to help you have the most success with your book. Now, it's a three-step approach that I've come up with, and I think that you're going to find it useful, but you have to go step by step. So we're going to start with step one. And step one is to define your personal goal as an author, right, in creating a book. So in order to do that, you first have to identify what type of author you are. Now, what do I mean by that? In my experience, there are basically three buckets that most authors fall into, right? They fall into one of these three buckets. The first bucket is what I call the literary interest bucket. And these are the types of people that really want to create books for the artistic aspect of it, right? Creating art for art's sake, okay? So that's the first bucket. Now, you're going to have to you'll see in a minute why it's important that we go through this, right? So just bear with me. So the second bucket is hyper-commercial interest. Now, these are the types of people on the opposite side of the spectrum from literary interest people who really just want to make money, right? They see books as income-producing assets. Their goal is to have passive income, and they're not really as concerned at all with the artistic aspects of bookmaking, right? So that's the second bucket. The third bucket is in the middle, and this bucket basically is a hybrid of the first two buckets, right? These are people potentially, these are the people who, like myself, came into the book publishing world because they loved books, right? Maybe you grew up reading books, you love books, and now you want to create books that an audience will love, similar to the books that you loved, right? But you're not necessarily in the literary camp because you're not only interested in art for art's sake, you also want to ideally turn this into a career, right? So in order to do that, you're going to have to make money from selling your books, right? So you're kind of in the middle ground approach. Now, before I move on and tell you how you're going to apply this, think about which camp you fall into. Now, there's no right or wrong camp, right? These are just different personalities, different goals that people have when they write books. But you have to figure out which camp you're in before moving forward to the next step. Before I move on to step two, I just want to point out that each of these different buckets has pros and cons associated with it, right? So the first camp, literary interest people, right? These are the people that they're really focused on the craft, the artistic aspect, creating beautiful works of art. Now, if you're in this camp, because you don't really care about the money piece or reaching an audience, you have full creative license, right? You can do whatever you want. You don't have to pay attention to market gaps and what people are actually searching for and things like that. So that's the main pro. You can basically just follow your heart, right? But the con is if that's your approach to creating books, there's a smaller likelihood that you're going to be able to make any money at it and have sort of commercial success, right? Now, the second camp, hyper-commercial, because you're really hyper-focused on making money, you're going to have to, whether you like it or not, accommodate market interests in what you're doing, right? So you can't just write whatever book you want to write about and hope that it appeals to an audience. You can do that, but you're not going to be very likely to have success toward reaching your goal, which in this case is making money, right? Now, the hybrid approach kind of has the best of both worlds, has some of the pros and some of the cons of those two buckets, and it's more of a middle ground approach, right? Okay, so now that's step one. You have to determine which of these camps you fall into, and then you move into step two, okay? Now, step two, we are going to choose the type of book that we want to create. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there are generally two types of books in the world, right? There's fiction and nonfiction. So if you want to create fiction, then generally speaking, you're looking to entertain an audience. You want to inspire an audience or evoke emotion. And you sometimes convey themes or messages, incorporate them into your books, right? But you're going to be using imaginary events, characters, and worlds, which is what makes it fiction, in order to achieve your goal, which you identified in step one, right? Or you could be in the camp that wants to create a nonfiction book. So do you want to inform your audience? Do you want to guide them in some way? Do you want to educate them? Do you want to advocate for them or advocate for some cause out there in the world, right, that you care about passionately? Or do you want to document reality or help readers solve a specific problem, right? If you want to do any of those things, then you're going to fall into the nonfiction camp. Okay, so that's step two. You're going to identify which type of book you want to create out of those two types. So now that you've done those two things, you're ready to move on to step three. But before I move on to step three, I just want to point out that you can download this. I'm going to put a link in the description, and you can download this from my website if you like. I'm also going to point out that this is my website right here. It's basically just a sign up form. You can go here if you like, and you can sign up for the book marketing, basically newsletter, right? So if you want to get some tips in your inbox on a weekly basis about how you can craft books, create books, and then later promote and market those books, I highly encourage you to sign up for this free newsletter. Okay, that being said, let's go back into the tutorial. So now we're ready for step three, right? So once you have defined your personal goals, right, in step one, as well as the type of book you want to create in step two, next, you need to apply the appropriate method below to your approach to coming up with book ideas. So basically, I've created, depending on how you answer the questions above in step one and two, I've created a number of different scenarios, and you'll see what I mean in a second, okay? So first, you might be in the literary interest camp, and you might want to create fiction books, right? So if that's the case for you, then this is your approach for how to come up with book ideas, okay? You want to write a book that moves you, inspires you, and or interests you in a genre that you want to write in, right? So first you want to identify your genre. You want to think about, do you like horror books? Do you like, middle grade fantasy books? Do you like thrillers? Now, because you have full artistic license in this camp, because you're not concerned about money at all or reaching your audience, you can write about whatever inspires you or moves you, right? And I encourage you to do that if this is the type of book you want to create. Now, I'm going to show you some tools in a second for how you can come up with ideas specifically if you're, let's say, having writer's block, okay? And this is the camp you fall into. But first, let's talk about nonfiction. So for the literary interest group, nonfiction is pretty similar, right? You want to write a book that moves you or inspires you about a topic that interests you, right? Now, you're still going to be solving problems for readers. You're going to inform them, guide them, or educate them because this is nonfiction. And you need to choose an appropriate category based on the fact that it's nonfiction. But again, you have full artistic license in this camp to write about whatever you want to write about. So I encourage you to just let your heart move you, right? What are you inspired by? Think about books that have inspired you in the past or authors that inspire you. Write down what it is about that book or author that really moves you or inspires you. Literally write it down on a piece of paper and then try to get to the heart of what it is that really is touching you on an emotional level. And that's what I believe you should be writing about if you're in this camp. And come up with ideas in that regard. So let's say you still need some help, right, coming up with ideas. In that case, you can also use this tool here. So I'm going to show you over here, this tool called ChatGPT, right? If you're still stuck, let's say you want to write a middle grade horror book, right? But you're at a loss for coming up for book ideas. Well, this is a great tool to help you brainstorm. So you can say, for example, hey, ChatGPT, I always like to be polite to chatbots. Please give me 10 ideas for a book in the middle grade horror niche, right? And it's going to give you some ideas. Now, because obviously your goal here is not to come up with a book that's going to be a bestseller because you're in the literary camp, but it's just going to give you some inspiration and help you to brainstorm, right? So you can feel free to look through these and see if any of these ideas just help you overcome writer's block, right? The Creepy Creek Carnival, for example, has a synopsis and you can ask ChatGPT for titles and to help you flesh out the details on your premise. But I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole. I want to get to the next camp. So that's just an idea for you in case you get stuck, right? And you still are having trouble coming up with ideas for your book, okay? So now let's talk about the next set of camps here. So now we're going to talk about the hyper-commercial interests camp in the case that you want to write fiction, okay? So in this case, you're in a different spot, right? Because you have different goals as a writer. You can't just write about whatever you want to write about. You have to accommodate your interest or your book to the market, okay? So in that case, my recommendation for you would be to approach this by starting out with keyword research, okay? And I'm going to do a deep dive on exactly what that looks like in a minute. But high level, right? You want to identify high search volume, low competition keywords, okay? And what you're trying to do is identify market gaps. Places in the market where people have an interest to find a book on a specific topic, but there's not a ton of competition yet. There's not yet a lot of books in that specific market space, in that niche, okay? And that's what keyword research is going to allow you to do. So once you've done the keyword research, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment, so stay tuned, create a high concept book idea related to that keyword in a high interest genre, right? So what do I mean by a high concept book? Well, I'm going to go through that in detail as well in a moment, so stay tuned. But once you come up with a high concept book that's related to the keyword that you've identified, then you're going to incorporate the keyword into your book title and or your subtitle and description, right? So this is what's going to allow you to go out and find that audience using the book that you create, which is going to in turn allow you to maximize the profitability of your book in the long run, okay? So the higher the search volume, the higher the interest, the lower the competition, the easier it will be to sell your books once you've created them. Okay, and then I just put here, tip, browse Amazon bestseller list for inspiration. Use keyword research tools to help you, and that's what I'm going to show you in a minute. But first, we're going to go through the rest of these scenarios. So the next scenario is hyper-commercial interest if you want to write a non-fiction book. Well, this is very similar to fiction, right? So you still want to start with keyword research, and you still want to create a high-concept book, a book idea that's related to that keyword, right? And you can try to find out what genres are trending as well, or what topics are trending. You can do that by looking on Amazon and doing the keyword research that I'm going to show you in a minute. But basically, this is the same idea, but instead of looking for keywords that are related to nonfiction, you're going to be looking for keywords that you can apply. In fiction, you're going to be looking for keywords that you can apply in nonfiction, right? So now we're going to talk about the third bucket. And by the way, please tell me which bucket are you guys in, right? Please tell me in the comments, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to serve this audience. I want to be able to make great content that you guys are interested in. So tell me, are you a hybrid? Are you high commercial? Are you literary? Hyper commercial, or are you literary? Put it in the comments so I can really get a gauge for what you guys are and what you're interested in. But now let's talk about hybrid fiction, right? And this is the camp that I would be in, generally speaking, right? I love books. I love the artful aspects of creating books. I like to create things that are beautiful. I'm a highly creative person, but I also want to I don't want to just, pump out books and create books and have no one read them, right? I want to sell books as well and find an audience. So this is the camp that I would be in, right? And so in this case, your priorities are a little different. Your goals are a little different. So your approach needs to be different. So in this case, I recommend you start with what moves you. Similar to like the literary camp, right? You're going to start with what inspires you or interests you, right? And only once you've identified that are you going to move into the keyword research. So, think about what genres you're interested in writing in. Think about what topics you're interested in. Think about the authors and books that have inspired you, right? And that you love. And try to create something in that space because that's where your heart is, right? And so you should follow that to create something that's beautiful and artistic. But once you've done that, you want to identify high search volume, low competition keywords that are related to whatever it was that interests you or inspires you, right? Create a high concept book idea related to that keyword. Okay, and again, I'm going to show you how to do the keyword research in a second. I'm going to show you exactly what a high concept book idea looks like in just a moment, so bear with me. And then you're going to incorporate the keyword into your book title or your description, right? And the higher the search volume, the higher the interest. So you're basically trying to get the best of both worlds here, right? You want to create something that's beautiful and artistic. You want to do it in a space that inspires you and moves you or interests you. But then you're going to use keyword research and put that into your book subtitle or title or description to help leverage the power of the hyper commercial approach, right? So now let's talk about nonfiction real quickly. Then I'm going to show you the keyword research tips, and I'm going to go into more detail about what a high concept book idea really is, right? So for hybrid nonfiction, again, you're going to start with what moves you, but now you're going to be starting with nonfiction topics that move you, right? So let's say you're passionate about the food industry, like I am, right? And you maybe you want to do something about trying to create a book that's an activism book about the food industry and how corporate money making has taken over the food industry or something like that, right? Well, start there because that's what moves you and inspires you, and you want to create something that's artful, something that you're passionate about. You want to craft something that's beautiful. But once you've identified your niche, then you're going to search for high search volume, low competition keywords in that niche, right? Or in that space related to that topic. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in a second, so stay tuned. Then again, you're going to create a high concept book idea related to that keyword, and I'll show you what that means. And here's where you're really going to incorporate this into helping you to sell books. So then you're going to incorporate the keyword into your book title, subtitle, and description. And that's what's going to help you basically take your artful creation and reach an audience, right? And then obviously you're going to have to market your book, and I'm going to cover that in separate videos. But okay, so we've talked about the 6 different approaches that are dependent on which camp you're in, right? Now I'm going to talk about what is a high concept book. And then we're going to get into the keyword research, right? So a high concept book idea, and this is only something that applies to, hyper commercial or hybrid people. Because if you're literary, you don't care about high concept. You create for the sake of creating art, right? But for the other camps, you definitely want to make sure, and it's part of the steps that I just mentioned, that you're creating a high concept book, right? You're going to do the keyword research. If you're in the hybrid camp, you're going to start with what inspires you, but then you're also going to make sure that it's a high concept book. So what is a high concept book? Basically, it's a book with a premise that is simple to explain, immediately intriguing, and has a strong appeal to a wide audience, right? So it's got to be simple to explain because you've got to stop the scroll, right? People are so distracted in this world that if you need to be able to grip them right away, right? So the concept of your book needs to be something that is self-explanatory, or just you're able to grip people right away with one sentence, right? It needs to be immediately intriguing. So it needs to be something that draws you in. And then it has to have strong appeal to a wide audience. Why? Well, the wider the audience, the bigger the total available audience size for your book, the more books you can sell. So that is what a high concept book is. And then in this document, I go into greater detail, right? So here are some features. High concept book idea should be unique. Why unique? Well, that bears on the fact that you're going to have lower competition, right? If you're the only person writing about this book, then it's going to be easier to sell that book. It should have universal appeal, right? That is, it should be relatable to a lot of different people or a broad audience. Again, it should be able to be explained in a single compelling sentence. Ideally, it should have conflict or drama, which raises the stakes and the tension in your book. And it should have an emotional hook, right? Now, by the way, if you want this document, this blueprint I've created, I'm going to put a link in the description. Feel free to download it for free and use it for your purposes, right? And then I talk about some examples of what is a high concept idea for a book, right? You know, what if dinosaurs were cloned and turned into a theme park attraction? Jurassic Park, okay? So that's a great example. Now, again, if you're stuck, feel free to go back to ChatGPT, and if you're in the high concept camp, you can say, give me some high concept ideas for a fantasy middle grade, and maybe it'll inspire you. Maybe it'll help you come up with some ideas, right? The World Beneath the Words, the Skybound Academy School for Cloudwalkers. Okay, so it's giving us some ideas, right? So that's another tool you can use to help inspire you if you do get stuck, right? But now I want to go into detail, as promised, on the keyword research component, right? So as I mentioned, for 4 out of the 6 different approaches, you're going to have to start with or eventually use keyword research. So now I want to show you what that looks like, right? And so for that, you can use a number of different tools. I'm going to show you one tool. Now, this isn't necessarily the best tool for this, and I'm going to do a separate video on my favorite tools for keyword research, but that's going to be a different topic for a different day. But this is a great tool to illustrate what I'm talking about, right? So let's say you're in the hybrid camp and you want to create a nonfiction book, okay? So you want to reach an audience. It's important to you to sell books. So you're going to have to do some keyword research and integrate that keyword research into your description and your title or subtitle. And you're in the nonfiction camp. So what I've suggested in that Word document we just looked at together is that because you're in the hybrid camp and not in the hyper commercial camp, you want to start with something that moves you or interests you, right? So let's say you love sewing. I would recommend thinking and make a list of all the different, topics or interests that move you. But let's say you've identified sewing, right, as a possible book that you want to write about in that niche, okay? So you might come to a tool like this, Publisher Rocket, and you can download this however you like, and just enter sewing, right? Because this is, you want to write a book about sewing, and it's going to give you a list of keywords, right? And it hides its data. For some reason, Publisher Rocket likes to be coy, and it doesn't give you the data until you press this magnifying glass button. But you're going to go through this keyword list, and you're going to look for topics that interest you. Or if you're in the hyper commercial camp, they don't even have to interest you, right? Because all you care about is the money opportunity. But if you're in the hybrid camp like me, you're going to look for books that interest you, and you're going to be able to write better books about topics that interest you, by the way, So that's another reason I highly recommend that approach. But here's one here, right? Sewing books for beginners, adults. So we're going to click on this to get at the data. And what you're looking for is low competition score and high Amazon monthly searches, right? That's basically giving us a proxy for interest. How many people are interested in that topic? And we're looking for market gaps. A market gap is a place where there's high interest but low competition, right? So, okay, so this one has 365 monthly searches. It says great number of searches, but I don't think that's the greatest. We can find a higher number, I think. And it's moderately competitive, right, with a score of 59. So you're going to go through this list and click on some ideas. I'm going to click on this one, Sewing for Beginners book. Well, look at that. Now we found a keyword that has much higher search volume, almost 10 times as much, 2,600 per month searches. So we have a lot more interest in this. And we have a comparable, moderately competitive score, right, for the competition element. So 59, 62, that's basically the same, but yet we're getting 10 times more interest. So I would definitely focus on this keyword, okay? So the next step, Sewing for Beginners book, right? We're going to write a book and on that topic, and then we're going to incorporate that keyword into our title, our subtitle, and or our description, right? So you might write a book called Sewing for Beginners. That might be the title of your book. Or it could be called, you know, whatever you want. The title could be whatever you want, and then the subtitle could be a book about sewing for beginners, right? But you have to incorporate the keyword into your title, subtitle, and or description. And that's pretty much it, folks. If you got value out of this video, please like, subscribe, consider signing up for my mailing list. I'll put a link in the description, and I'll see you next time.